Dr. Barry, London News. This is coming from, well, fictional places. So what I say, I don't want the authorities to take me too serious. I've got three videos coming up you've got to watch. One is about council rates. Now I have to remember that the councils are a private corporation registered with Dun & Bradstreet in the District Corporation of London, which is one of the three independent cities in the world. I'm sure you're all aware of that by now. We've got the Vatican, Washington, D.C., and of course the District Corporation of London. It's an independent country. It's called the Square Mile, and anything registered in there has no authority outside of that independent country. It's not even subject to the Crown in which it's embedded in London, right? And that Square Mile. Now, this rates thing is not my video, but someone's put it together, but it explains a whole concept, and I will put the credits up to the man who produced this video. It's so well worth watching. Let's have a look at this video, share it, and let's get some empathy, because we're going down the tubes. We have one hope, and that's Pauline Hanson and One Nation. That's the only hope we have, and the common law court, which is the people's court. People power through the common law court, through common law, and through the office of sheriff. We're not an independent police service or anything. We're there to help, support the police as well, and to get some justice, which is a strange word in today's society, back into the community. Thanks for watching. Spread it, share this, take it serious, because it will affect you. Bye for now.
We go to air this afternoon. Firefighters and farmers are staging a fiery protest over a controversial new tax descending on the steps of the Victorian Parliament and hijacking state budget day.
Like millions of Victorians, Tony is facing a hefty rise to his rates notice because of a new state levy.
We're going to push back on it and we're not going to pay it.
Don't know what we'll give up, but we'll work it out somehow. Because it has to be paid, because we'll be homeless otherwise.
When retirees Anne and John Gallagher received their council rates in the mail, they were faced with the prospect of foregoing home repairs to pay them. Council rate rises are affecting homeowners across the country as local governments continue to grapple with worsening staffing and financial challenges.
They're concerned that they're just raising more money to make the same mistakes, because there's been a total lack of transparency about how we got in this mess.
Prices are increasing everywhere. Building, wages, everything's increasing.
Well, I actually think we're probably past angry. We're just to the stage we're just hurting that much that we're past angry.
Do you have the cash flow to support buying the property, the stamp duty, the deposit, and then the maintenance, the insurance costs?
I could move back in after they've done the renovations. However, they're looking to put the rent up by over $250 a week. I'm on a disability pension. I cannot afford that.
Right. Here's what the Victorian government really doesn't want you to know, mate. For thousands of Melbourne homeowners, the total property tax bill landing in the letterbox has now crossed, or is fast approaching, $10,000 a year. Not the mortgage, not the insurance. Just the bill for the privilege of owning the home. Council rates, plus a brand new emergency services levy that nearly doubled overnight, plus land tax, plus waste charges, all stacked on top of each other into one brutal annual hit. And unlike your mortgage, this is a bill you can never pay off and never escape. And here's the part that should make your blood boil.
Councils are facing at the moment is that construction costs have really surged over the past few years. And for local government, the biggest part of their bills is generally on upgrading, maintaining and building infrastructure.
This isn't a trend that's emerged overnight. This is something that's built up over time, and affordability really is at the centre of this issue.
Too much for me in that respect. Like, mistakes were made, and I'll admit that, but it was sort of, I couldn't fix it.
Across Victoria, unpaid council rates have now hit $920 million, up more than 100 million in a single year, and on track to crack 1 billion, because hundreds of thousands of families simply cannot keep up anymore. This isn't a handful of people falling behind. It's an entire system buckling under the weight. So today, we're breaking down exactly how your rates bill exploded, we're exposing the new levy that nearly doubled in a single year, and we're showing you why the councils themselves are now threatening to refuse to collect it. Whether you own, you're renting, or you're an investor, this bill is coming for you. You need to see this. Let's get into it. Now, here's the thing almost nobody talks about when they buy a home. Everyone obsesses over the mortgage and the interest rate. But there's a second bill, one you can never pay off, never refinance, and never negotiate.
Yeah, the last 6 months has been a fair slog. And it'd be so much nicer not to be here fighting this. But unfortunately, we haven't got a choice because we're actually not going to survive.
The new levy is calculated by adding a fixed charge that varies by property type and a variable charge. This is calculated using a property's capital improved value.
It just goes up every single year for as long as you own the place. The experts have a name for it, the silent mortgage, and it's been climbing faster than almost any other cost of owning a home. Nationally, council rates have jumped 39% over the past decade, and in 2024 alone, they rose nearly 5%, outpaced only by rent. Translation: your rates are rising faster than your wages, faster than inflation, year after year. Let me show you what that actually feels like for a real Melbourne household. One homeowner sat down and added it all up over 5 years. Their SHUM insurance had gone up 61%, their car insurance 40%, and their council rates up 73% in 5 years. Their exact words: they say inflation is 4 or 5%. These increases are 2 to 3 times that. That's the silent mortgage in one household's letterbox, and it's the stacking that breaks people.
Jane calls her home a safe haven, but her 12-acre regional sanctuary attracts a hefty council rates bill.
A collection agency that came from the council. They were going to take the house if I didn't pay the full amount.
When Melbourne owners actually list out everything they pay, the numbers pile up frighteningly fast. In one crowdsourced thread, owners spelled it out. Council rates around $2,500 a year, house and contents insurance around $2,000, water bills, and on it goes. For inner north apartment owners, it was even worse. One listed strata fees of $5,000, plus rates, plus water, plus an embedded hot water and power system charging more than the retail rate. Add it all together, and you're easily at $12,000 to $15,000 a year, every year, just to hold the home you already bought. And it's pushing people to genuine regret. In early 2026, on a thread titled, "We Never Would Have Bought," one Melbourne mortgage holder summed up the mood perfectly. Their words: "It's not the interest rate hikes that worry me. It's the increases in council rates, insurance, power bills, and all that." Think about what that means. The part of home ownership now breaking people's budgets isn't even the mortgage. It's the silent mortgage sitting beside it.
Mortgage Stress Victoria eventually brokered a deal for Jane's bank to take on her debt. But the group says more and more people are struggling to pay their rates and warns most councils aren't delivering hardship assistance to the few who need it most.
And here's the bit that really stings. The reason your rates keep climbing isn't that the council is doing more work for you. It's simply that your home went up in value. Rates are calculated off your property's valuation, and in 2025, Melbourne valuations grew more than 8%. So your home rises in value on paper, money you can't actually spend unless you sell, and the council quietly charges you more for the privilege of living in it. One Melburnian put the question bluntly online: why do council rates go up when property prices go up, when the council isn't doing anything extra? It's a fair question, and the answer is uncomfortable. Now, to be fair, Victoria does have a rate cap, a limit the Victorian government sets each year on how much councils can lift the total rates take. For 2025-26, it was 3%, dropping to 2.75 for the year after. On paper, that sounds reasonable, even restrained.
Clear direction from the state government. Councils just don't need to use their resources and their sheer size to humiliate, shame or bully people into action. And they're just really struggling to pay their rates bill. What we've found is that councils have basically unilaterally ignored and rejected 99.9% of applications.
But here's the catch this whole video is going to unpack. That cap only covers ordinary council rates. It does not cover the new state levy, it doesn't cover land tax, and it doesn't cover the waste charges. So while the headline number looks tame, the real bill in your letterbox is escaping the cap entirely. And it helps to understand how the bill is actually built, because the formula is where the trap hides. Your council takes the value of your property and multiplies it by a rate in the dollar. In the city of Melbourne, for example, residential properties pay around 3.9 cents per dollar of valuation in 2025-26, up from 3.78 the year before. So two things push your bill up at once. The rate in the dollar creeps up and your property's valuation climbs. When both rise together, the bill jumps faster than that headline 3% cap would ever suggest, because the cap limits the council's total take, not necessarily what lands on your individual notice after a revaluation.
Well, residents living at an industrial estate in Melbourne have had a tough few days after the local council, get this, suddenly decided to enforce 30-year-old zoning laws and kick them out.
Victorian Council's poor approach to hardship assistance, finding common practices that couldn't be justified. These included not informing ratepayers of all their options, refusing to consider waivers and deferrals, and charging penalty interest on debts.
But here's what nobody's telling you. The reason your bill is exploding past the cap isn't your council getting greedy. It's a single new charge the Victorian government bolted on, one that nearly doubled overnight on every home in the state, and I can show you the exact rate table that proves it. So here's the thing. On the 1st of July 2025, the Victorian government replaced the old fire services levy with a new one, the Emergency Services and Volunteers Fund. Sounds harmless enough, until you look at the actual numbers. The variable rate charged on a residential property jumped from 8.7 cents to 17.3 cents per $1,000 of your home's value. That's an increase of almost 99%, nearly doubled in 1 year on every home in the state. And this isn't theoretical. One council, Port Phillip, laid out the real dollars on its own rates notices. For a $500,000 apartment, the levy rose from $175 to $222. But for a $1.7 million house, it leapt from $280 to $430, a 54% jump in a single year for one line on the bill. And zoom out, and the scale is staggering. From that one council's ratepayers alone, the levy pulled in around $37.5 million, a 57% increase on the year before. Multiply that across every council in Melbourne, and you start to see the size of this thing. The hit to individual councils is eye-watering. From the City of Melbourne's ratepayers, the levy demands an extra $55 million. Stonnington, nearly $20 million. Yarra, over $14 million. This is money being extracted from your suburb and sent to the state. And here's where it gets worse, because the people who actually send you the bill hate it too. Councils across Victoria are now in open revolt. They've been ordered to collect this levy on the state's behalf, and many are furious about it. Some have threatened to refuse to collect it altogether. One inner-city mayor put it about as bluntly as you'll ever hear a public official speak, saying his job was not to do the state government's dirty work. To put the levy in plain per-person terms, it works out to roughly $60 extra per person per year for ordinary ratepayers, but for farms, it's an extra $680. That's the difference that lit the fuse. A suburban household copping $60 might grumble. A farming family copping nearly $700 across multiple titles in the middle of a drought. That's a household being pushed to the wall. And the anger isn't just in the council chambers. It spilled onto the streets of Melbourne. Thousands of farmers and firefighters brought the CBD to a standstill, blockading Parliament with CFA trucks. One farmer, facing the levy across 25 separate property titles, said he would simply refuse to pay it. Another, a sixth-generation farmer, said it plainly. It's getting to the stage where the farmer will not survive these taxes. This is the worst year on record for many of them, in the middle of a drought, and the bill went up anyway. Now, to be fair, the Victorian government did partially back down after the backlash, announcing a 2-year rate freeze on the levy for farmers. But, and this is the crucial part, the relief for farmers did not extend to ordinary residential homeowners who still copped the full hike, and increases on investment properties were only deferred, not cancelled. Translation: the people protesting loudest got a reprieve. The quiet suburban homeowner got the full bill. And on top of the new levy, there's the waste charge, another line that's quietly ballooning. In Port Phillip, the waste charge alone rose 13% in a year, driven by a 22% jump in the state's landfill fee. Every layer, stacking higher. And here's where it gets worse, because the cap that's supposed to protect you? For the first time in years, councils are now smashing straight through it. And the single most shocking number I've found shows just how badly families are already drowning. Let me show you. Now, that 3% rate cap I mentioned, the one that's meant to be your protection, here's the number I've been holding back. Across Victoria, the unpaid rates pile has hit $920 million, up more than $100 million in a single year, and it's on track to break $1 billion. The statewide arrears rate is now over 11%, and in urban Melbourne, it's the worst in the state at over 14%. Let that sink in. Almost 1 in 7 Melbourne rates bills is now going unpaid. That's not laziness. That's families choosing between the rates notice and the grocery bill. And the cap itself is starting to crack. For the first time since 2020, 2 councils have now exceeded the rate cap. One of them, Alpine Shire, lifting rates nearly a full percentage point above the limit. And another, Hepburn Shire, was granted permission to raise rates by a full 10%, 7 points above the cap, just to plug a $4 million shortfall. Residents there were, predictably, furious. So who actually pays the headline $10,000? This is where it gets concrete. In Melbourne's prestige suburbs, Toorak, Hawthorn, Canterbury, Brighton, the maths gets brutal. Take a $5 million home in Toorak. Using the council's own rate, that's over $5,000 in general council rates alone. Now add the emergency services levy, add the waste charges, and for an apartment, add the owner's corporation fees, and you sail straight past $10,000 a year. And this isn't a handful of mega mansions either. In a suburb like Brighton East, the median house price has pushed past $2.5 million. And on the general rate alone, that's already well over $4,000 before you've added a cent of levy, waste charge or land tax. In wealthy Boroondara, Hawthorn, Kew, Camberwell, the median valuation alone now sits around $1.5 million. And the homes above that, the $5, $10, $15 million properties, are looking at council rates in the 5-figure range on their own. For thousands of these households, $10,000 a year isn't a worst-case scenario, it's the baseline. And it's not just the mansions. A real Melbourne apartment owner confirmed the headline number themselves. They posted that their owner's corporation fees alone were $8,100 a year, and combined with council fees, the total hit $10,000 a year. For an apartment, that's the silent mortgage crossing the 10 grand line for an ordinary inner Melbourne unit owner. And when families can't pay, the consequences are genuinely frightening. An investigation uncovered the story of a Victorian woman, we'll call her Jane, whose rates bill of around $5,000 a year spiraled once the council piled on penalty interest to a debt of more than $30,000. The council threatened to take her home. Her words, "To think that this haven that helped me through so much would be taken away from me over unpaid council rates. And here's the cruelty baked into the system. Councils are legally required to offer hardship relief to people who genuinely can't pay, but an investigation found that of 44 Victorian councils, only 7 were waiving any rates at all for people in financial hardship, and across all of them, just $360,000 was waived out of more than $3 billion charged. Translation: the help exists on paper, but almost nobody actually gets it. And in the meantime, the penalty interest keeps compounding, which is exactly how Jane's $5,000 bill ballooned into a $30,000 debt. Miss the rates, and the system doesn't help you catch up. It piles on interest until you're drowning. Now, here's where Melbourne fits into the bigger picture, and the comparison is genuinely surprising. Compared to other parts of the country, and across the ditch, Victoria's 3% rate cap actually looks restrained. Over in New Zealand, Wellington pushed through a rates increase of nearly 10% in a year, and Auckland nearly 7%, with no equivalent cap at all. In parts of regional New South Wales, some councils lifted rates by more than 90% over 4 years. To be fair, that's the genuine counterpoint here. On the headline council rate number alone, Melbourne homeowners are actually capped more tightly than many others. But, and this is the whole point, that cap is a magician's trick. While everyone stares at the tame 3%, the real burden is escaping through the side door. The levy that nearly doubled, the land tax, the waste charges. The total tax stack on a Victorian house and land package has been estimated by the building industry at around $373,000, climbing from 37% of the property price to 43% in just 6 years. And the interstate comparison stings for a different reason. Victoria's other property taxes are heavier than the neighbours. One Melburnian who moved to Brisbane laid it out. On a $750,000 Victorian property, the rates were around $1,700, and on top of that, their Victorian land tax had quadrupled in a single year. That land tax barely exists for most ordinary owners up in Queensland. Same money, different state, wildly different bill. Which is exactly why investors have been quietly packing up and leaving Victoria. And here's the trick that catches even savvy homeowners off guard. The rate freeze that isn't really a freeze. The City of Melbourne, after freezing rates 1 year, brought in what it described as an average 2.75% rise the next. But because of that earlier freeze, ratepayers were effectively paying around 5.75% more than they were 2 years earlier. Translation: the modest increase you're quoted often hides a much bigger jump once you look at what you were actually paying before. And why is all this happening? An expert from the Grattan Institute gave the clearest explanation. Councils are getting financially crushed because construction costs, the single biggest part of their budgets for building and maintaining roads, drains and infrastructure, have surged. So they're squeezed between a hard cap on what they can charge and exploding costs to do their job, and the only release valves are these extra levies and charges that sit outside the cap. You're filling the gap. Right, so where does this go from here? 3 roads. Best case, and this is the optimistic one, the backlash forces a genuine rethink. The emergency services levy gets wound back for everyone. Not just farmers, councils get fairer funding so they're not forced to lean on side charges. And hardship relief is actually delivered to the families who need it, instead of sitting unused on a shelf. If that happens, the silent mortgage stops growing faster than your wages. It's possible. The protests show the pressure is real. Realistic case, and this is what the data actually backs. The 3% cap stays in place as political cover, but the levies, the waste charges, and the land tax keep climbing around it. So your total bill keeps rising regardless of the cap. The arrears pile keeps growing past $1 billion. More councils quietly apply to break through the cap like Hepburn did, and the silent mortgage just keeps getting louder. Not a sudden shock, A slow, relentless squeeze. Worst case, costs keep surging. More councils breach the cap. The arrears blow past $1 billion. And more families like Jane find themselves buried under penalty interest with their homes on the line. If valuations keep climbing and the levies keep stacking, the dream of actually owning your home outright, of one day being free of all these bills, for a whole lot of Melbourne families, that dream is, frankly, absolutely cooked. So where do you sit in all this? Because everyone watching is somewhere in this story. If you're a homeowner, the single most important thing you can do this year is actually read your rates notice line by line, because the council rates are capped, but the levy, the land tax and the waste charges are not, and that's where the real increases are hiding. If you think your valuation is too high, you have the right to object to it, and that's your one lever to push the bill down. If you're an investor or landlord, understand that some councils are openly proposing to double your rates while halving them for owner-occupiers, so the gap is only going to widen. And if you're renting and you think none of this touches you, think again, because every council and every analyst has said the same thing. Landlords simply hand these costs straight on to you as higher rent. Drop a comment and tell me what your rates bill did this year. How much did it? Jump? I read every single one. Here's the truth. For thousands of Melbourne families, the combined property tax bill has crossed or is closing in on $10,000 a year. Unpaid rates across the state have hit $920 million, and the cap that's meant to protect you only covers part of the bill. It's not bad luck. It's a stack of charges designed to escape the one limit you were told would keep you safe. I'll be breaking down Melbourne's housing crisis like this every week. Subscribe to Aussie Explained so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.